This is Jonathan Herbst, founder and CEO of Scale Up Growth Partners. Welcome again to our Stories of Scaling Up series, where I'm chatting with owners, founders, and business leaders of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for the company. Today, I'm speaking to Avnesh Ratnanesan. I'm sorry if I hope you butchered that, Avi. I do apologise. He's the founder and CEO of Energesse. So welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to be here. Very excited.
Great. So I'm hoping you can correct my pronunciation. So tell me, please, what do you do? What does the company do, and how long have you been doing it for?
Sure. Well, basically, I founded Energesse about 10 years ago. I'll start with the last question. So I'm a doctor by background, and then did an MBA, got into the corporate healthcare industry. So I was in senior management at Pfizer, head of staff there, chief of staff there for a while, as well as medical director, before founding a couple of tech startups prior to founding Energesse in 2012. Our mission and vision at Energesse has really been about improving people's lives, improving 1 billion lives, really to improve that work-life experience of people. The initial first 10 years, and we've just turned 10 actually, a lot of our work was focused on the healthcare industry, where we felt we could make the biggest impact, particularly with my healthcare background. We've since branched out into corporate enterprise, and a lot of our work has been around, we started off improving customer experience and developing technologies for that, as well as consulting and advisory services. But as we evolve, and this thing called the pandemic hit us in 2020, we expanded our capability to also help with emergency management and health and safety. Surprisingly, by the end of 2020, for the work that we did, we won an award from the International Hospital Federation. So that was a global award for COVID.
Congratulations.
It was a big sort of, I suppose, a sense of service from us to go out and help those, healthcare organizations that were really struggling at the time that COVID first hit us. And it also validated the fact that we could pivot with our technology and advisory services into another specialty area. Now, in the last 12 months, organizations had approached us to say, hey, look, you've done a great job on some of this work that you've done with us, but our biggest problem now is workforce shortages. Right. In fact, it's the biggest problem across businesses. Well, 85% of businesses in Australia are struggling with those shortages. So we've really expanded to now help organizations with the workforce side of things, which is their great challenge right now. Yeah.
Okay, great. So tell me, how would you describe your core customer, your best customer?
Yeah, right now, the majority of the customers tend to be CEOs or CHROs or chief HR leaders or CFOs that are strategic thinkers. They want to get ahead of the game in terms of getting on top of the problem of workforce shortages, and they want to be proactive. And what I mean by that is that a lot of we've been in crisis mode for the last 3 years. Right, the pandemic has hit us and really affected us from a health and safety and infectious disease perspective, but also from a business operations perspective. And lots of CEOs have largely been reacting to the changes. My best customers think proactively. They want to get on top of it. They're willing to invest in prevention. They're willing to invest to operational improvement, and they largely sit in that mid-tier of the market. So really organizations that can be from 100 people to 1,000 people in terms of staffing. Having said that, we are also in discussions with organizations in the US, such as the Mayo Clinic, which have 70,000 staff. So our market is evolving quite significantly, particularly because the issue of workforce shortages is so broad.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was mentioning to a client of mine, or recently graduated client of mine, Mike Morgan at Insight, and 1,000 staff, 6 countries, and they're doing very, very well. But this is a key area that they're grappling with, particularly in the technology space.
Yeah, absolutely. There's significant competition for talent. The border restrictions have prevented, migration. A lot of people are also sick from COVID or fearful of working back in the office. And there's also been this great trend of what's called a great reevaluation. A lot of people have reevaluated their lives over the last few years, don't want to work as much or want to do different jobs, which affects the participation rate in the workforce. What we do is go to a deeper level with each organization, understand what are the specific factors for your industry that's driving people to come in or leave the organization at a very deep level, and then help that CEO and senior executive develop very specific targeted solutions to help them retain their staff, keep that people and culture happy and engaged in order to have the most productive workforce.
Great. So we were talking about COVID. So what are some of the actions that you implemented during the pandemic that you've kept in the business going forward?
So one of the key things during this time was obviously our fundamental philosophy is to be customer-centered. And everybody says that, but we're particularly good at gaining very, very deep customer insights. We do that through interviews. We do that through analytics tools that are more advanced than most organizations. That depth of insight has allowed us to pivot and create technology solutions or consulting services that are more advanced in the market, that can actually give the customers better outcomes. We have held that competency or capability throughout all the products we've developed. Now, that competency has then led us to develop 3 decision support tools. So we developed one for patient experience, for pandemic management, for workforce management. Now, every time we do it, we get raving feedback from our customers, right? That's a core competency. The second thing I would say is our people. We've really focused on our people and really focused on maintaining the motivation and the well-being of our team. You will find now a lot of companies having that well-being conversation that they never had before. It's a new thing. Whereas with my background as a doctor, I always knew that this is fundamental to human performance. And so whenever I coach my team, well-being is part of that conversation. It's a core part of our OKR or KPI reviews. It is not a separate initiative. Corporate organizations have now tuned to this and now trying to figure out, how do I do this, right? But we've kept that core. And then thirdly, aside from maintaining that core products, customers, and employees, it's really looking at how do we continue to be agile in our operations? How do we continue to pivot, maintain a strong business model in line with what is occurring? And so part of that has been the expansion to the US. So we've set up our US subsidiary. We are in deep conversations with some of the leading and mid-tier organizations there. So that growth mindset is something we've maintained throughout the pandemic as well.
Can I deep dive a bit further? So you've got a mixture of consulting, technology provision. How much of your workforce are actually remote? How often do you bring them together? Can you tell me how that model looks?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. So our organization was always remote first. Right? So we never focused on having an office. We never focused on getting people together physically. We just looked for the best talent wherever they are, and then created a culture and an operation working model that could be successful irrespective of where you are in the world. So my team are across 6 countries, right? And we've got 23 people. That's a large spread for a small team, but we've always been able to make that work. So how do you do that? The way you do that is firstly, obviously identifying talent and bringing them in irrespective of where they are. And having that openness and agility, you have to have back-end systems that work for that. But very important for any organization, particularly now, is that social bonding, that connection, that human connection, that all the people are driving for the common purpose of Energesse. They absolutely love what they do. They love the people that they work with. They really want to work here and they really want to make a difference in customers' lives. And so even when we're so separated technologically and in different countries, struggling with our own personal challenges, they are commonly bonded by this mission and purpose and the people that they're working with. So many organizations don't have this. And that's why they lose the staff. They don't have that connection. And part of this, and we recently just had an offsite in Kuala Lumpur where we brought together part of our team together for a 10th anniversary dinner. And what we found and what was fed back to us is that the leadership is really important as well. If the leader is the best leader possible, then that will hold the team together in the toughest times. So our core leadership team also is something that we're continually developing on a continuous basis in terms of our skills, our abilities, our mindset.
I just want to, sorry, I'm going to push you a little bit further. What sort of rhythms, like, you've got 23 remote team members. What rhythms in the week do you have to bring them together to communicate, track KPIs, etc.? How does that actually work in the business?
Yeah, really good question. Daily huddles. So we still continue to have daily huddles with the leadership team every single day. That was something we introduced actually during the pandemic, initially to help check in that everyone was okay. Yeah. Right. And that's something that's stuck. So thank you for asking that question. We do have regular sales meetings, so twice a week. We have marketing meetings also twice a week. We have product meetings twice a week. About 3 times a week. And we also continue to have leadership team meetings every week. Now, it seems like there's a lot of meetings, but fundamentally, particularly from my background at Pfizer, what I found is that whilst this may seem like a lot of meetings, one of the things that it does do, it helps us course correct very, very frequently. But the biggest thing I saw was that a lot of organizations waste time because they don't communicate and they don't connect frequently, right? And so they're off doing their own thing, off tangent on their strategies and tactics, whereas that frequent course correction with a good agenda helps prevent that waste of time occurring. When you're a small team, you can't afford to waste time. So that's one of the big things that we also learned in Embedded.
It's interesting. You brought up a couple of really good points in my opinion as a leadership and business coach. One thing I coach is, and I don't know if we're going to be able to see this with the, is that going to work? This is the problem with backgrounds, of course.
Okay, yeah, I can see that a bit.
This is I coach a weekly sync meeting with the leadership team. Same time every week. Good news. The scorecard dashboard, the key numbers we're looking at. What are the quarterly priorities? Just to remind ourselves of the 3 to 5 quarterly priorities. Any customer employee headline feedback, and then the to-do list that we're looking at. Tracking week to week, and finally an issue where we 40 minutes deep dive into an issue every week. That in my team is 10 o'clock every Monday. Works like you, I've got people all over the place. So it's and all over the world, from like even my video editor is in Ukraine. So that works very well. The other thing you mentioned, the daily huddle, it's probably the most effective meeting in my mind that companies have. What I coach is 15 minutes stand up, topics, good news, round robin of everybody, which includes wins from yesterday. What am I working on today in detail, so that you tap into the knowledge, the collective knowledge. KPIs. Then what am I working on today, and then where am I stuck? And the last question is probably the best, because like all entrepreneurs and all CEOs, we have forever been interrupted and having my flow interrupted by having the where am I stuck. It means I can plan my day and my team can plan the day. There's if anybody's interested in that, go to my website, Scale Up Growth, and there's a couple of blogs on meeting rhythms. Thank you, and I agree. The big thing about and you're a product company, so having those product meetings is critical. But as you said, the agenda. So to me, what's the future look like, and the main challenges for you moving forward?
So I think the future is very exciting in terms of, I suppose, our main core focus being where the large segment of demand is at the moment is how do you address the workforce shortages, people and culture issues, how do I keep my staff, and how do I optimize my costs in the business, particularly when workforce is somewhere between 60 to 85% of an organization's cost base, right? What we are doing is helping organizations reframe that into your asset base as opposed to your cost base, right? Your people are your best asset, and you have to look after them. And so part of what we're doing is really focusing on helping these organizations improve their business, whether it's a healthcare organization or corporate enterprise, around strengthening their people and their workforce, addressing recruitment, retention issues. And the future for us is also expanding to the US. So we are getting more interest over there. So whilst we're an Australian organization, we have done some work in Asia and continuing to get interest there, but particularly the US market seems to have some significant demand. We are looking at, or not looking at, but rather one of our technology products that we're developing is called PME. That is a decision support tool that is AI enabled to help take the data from all the HR systems in organizations and translate that into actions. Right? We used to call it data analytics translating to actionable insights, but I'm not interested in that. Actionable insights, the person still has to figure out, what do I do with this, right? Yep. The next step, the next generation of the future of these products is decision support. So give me insightful actions, yep. Right? Give me the data and give me the actions that I need to be taking. That's what we're developing, and that's where we see groundbreaking sort of breakthroughs for organizations once we can do that. And so building that digital advisor for people managers, we see that as being a world first in terms of actually creating almost if you're an Avengers fan or Iron Man fan, they had the AI called Jarvis that kind of has all Tony Stark's data and tells him what to do. We're building that, but for managers. And so we really see the future being a combination of services and this sort of decision support products.
Fabulous. So tell me, so you've been an entrepreneur for 10 plus years now. What do you think has been your biggest learning as a business owner?
It's very interesting because I was literally last night reflecting on the last 15 years as an entrepreneur and what were some of the biggest challenges that I experienced in that time and how did I overcome them with the team. One of the things that, and this might seem really trite, but firstly, the entrepreneur has to make the decision, do I want to keep going? Yeah. That first decision, that mindset, because when you face these biggest challenges, you're under tremendous emotional stress and you can be under financial stress, health stress. Sometimes you can't feed your kids or whatever it might be, right? Entrepreneurs tend not to read a lot of this stuff, but you have to decide, do I want to keep going or do I want to pack it in? That first decision, once you make that decision, everything else starts to fall into place if you put in the work, right? So that's one of my biggest learnings, making that decision, but also making sure that when you make that decision, you talk to your team, your board, your core team members, find out what motivates them. And the last few weeks, we've spoken to all my team and find out, what's your dream?
Right.
Are you getting your dream done here or not? If not, how can we make that dream be achieved here, right? And if everybody's dream is aligned to the goals of Energesse, we cannot quit. We have to keep going. And we'll find a way. The technology, the operations, the business model, all that will work itself out if everybody is aligned on their dreams and the purpose of the company. Does that make sense, John?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. But I might just add a bit because implicitly in there is having the right team, having the right, I call it who, not how, having the right who's before you even focus on the how. Because if you have the right who's, lo and behold, it will all happen.
Yes, absolutely.
And the other part of that, of course, is you have the right who's. You end up with this self-perpetuating business that does not require you or me to be the leader. You've got the right people. You've got a built-in succession plan that means the business will continue.
Yes.
It's and allows you, if you choose that, no, actually, I don't want to do that. I want to take a break for family or whatever, that you are able to. Yeah, no, it's a very good point. When you think of the word successful, who pops to mind first, and can you tell me why?
Yeah, again, very, very good question. So there's a couple of people that do come to mind. I mean, I would say Gandhi and Steve Jobs, both very, very sort of common names. The why may be slightly different. Gandhi, because obviously is a man of high achievement, but he won a country. So if you think about a business winning market share or a territory, Gandhi won a whole country with very little resource. And that's one of the traits of entrepreneurs. You have to win market share and win over customers with very little resource. It's okay if you're a Pfizer or a big company and you're very well resourced to win that. But the amount of ingenuity you need and creativity you need and passion, belief in order to win an outcome, a large outcome with very little resource, Gandhi is up there for that. Steve Jobs also, I would say, from that passion, creation, the ability to innovate, never give up, and to do that well and truly above competitors. I think that is a big difference. I think the challenge we find in Australia is that incremental innovation is accepted, but significant breakthrough innovation is very difficult in a conservative country like Australia. And so what I find with Steve Jobs, that they always found a way to find investors or customers that believed in that breakthrough innovation, right? And were able to work with people at that level, and that alignment was able to occur. And so, and common amongst both of these people, most people may want to know, is their spiritual core. And that's very important to me, because if you say, what is success? Success is not just financial success. From a perspective of well-being, you see a lot of entrepreneurs that achieve the financial success, but absolutely abysmal at their relationships with their family, their health is terrible, and many other factors like that. So we have a holistic self-leadership scan that's a wellness wheel that looks at all the different aspects of life, and one of those aspects is spiritual, and you have to be good at all those aspects. If one of those drops off, that will lead to very poor consequences. And we've seen a lot of businesses fail because they were absolutely great financially, but particularly when family businesses, the families quarrel, the business breaks up. Yep. The founder's health deteriorates, the business breaks up, right? So you've got to look after all these different areas. And often venture capitalists and investors, they don't look at all that. They just look at how much money you're making, right? Whereas for me, it's very important for me and my team. We're building a sustainable company for decades, and we've got to make sure our people can live through that and have successful areas of their lives for that period of time. I hope that answered your question. It was
it really does, and it does it well. Thank you. Interesting, I interviewed another CEO, Nitai Levy, and it's worth having a look at that video, because he's sort of got a Warren Buffett type investment fund here in Australia, and he talked in detail about when succession fails within families, and it's really interesting. I call it the valleys of death. He talks about the percentages of businesses that fail at the second and third generation, and the reasons why. So it really nails down to the point you're making. Yeah. The other thing I think about Gandhi and Steve Jobs in particular was, and one of Steve Jobs' my favourite quotes of Steve Jobs is, he was just as proud of what Apple chose not to do as what they chose to do. And I think that alignment of purpose with both Gandhi and Steve Jobs they're very, very interesting points. When you choose to focus on what's most important and ignore the rest, you can achieve a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, and that's a key point. There's this thing called the entrepreneur's curse, which I'm sure you're aware, is that entrepreneurs are bright and they have lots of great ideas, and they tend to try lots of different things. And so as a strategist, because I was head of strategy at Pfizer back then, strategy is about what you say no to.
Yes.
Just as much as what you say yes to. And so that's really important. And I think the key thing, and where we help a lot of CEOs and CHROs and the senior executives, is they're often trying lots of things. They're in metrics, a very gray area of lots of complex metrics. They don't really know what to focus on. And that's where we come in with our consulting or technology to help them focus on the most important thing, which is particularly much harder in larger companies.
And not the shiny object syndrome. It's an interesting point. And the other thing is, and look, sorry, plug, I'm a CEO and business coach, but the other thing about Steve Jobs, a lot of people don't know, is that he and Eric Schultz, who was the CEO of Google at the time, they both had the same coach at the same time, which is an extraordinary thing if you think about it, given that they're in competition. But they both recognise this value of a coach, which is, as I said, my apologies, it's a blatant plug.
Not at all. I've had coaches for the last decade or so. I can't live without them. It's a very fundamental part, I think, of
it's very, very lonely at the top, and having someone to brainstorm with, work with is really valuable. Books, podcasts, biographies of leaders. Are there a couple you'd recommend?
Yeah, one that has really caught me quite a bit is a book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Olet, and that is a lecturer from MIT. Out of all the technology product development books that I've read over this last decade, this one is a standout by far, because it really gives you the sequence of steps that you need to take your product through. Lots of other books have got great methodologies and so on, but they don't order it in a sequence. And that's the big failure, is that you end up with, being the entrepreneur mindset, you try to want to do too many things. Whereas this book really helps you sequence all the steps you need to go through in order to create a great product. So certainly highly recommend that one.
Fabulous. So last question, any last piece of advice or parting words for a CEO out there listening, or someone who wants to be a CEO?
Look, I think the biggest thing for me is, have the humility to ask for help, and be open to advice. And the counterbalance to that is develop your own bullshit meter in terms of knowing what's good advice and what's not, because a lot of people also fall into the advice trap and advise on things that they're not experts at. So really, firstly, have the humility. Ask for help, ask for advice. For me, that's what great CEOs do, and they listen well. And then secondly, it's also being able to, I suppose, curate the people around you, so that you are getting sort of the best advice over time as well.
So again, having the right team, whether they be in the company or outside.
Correct. Exactly right. Right. And that applies to your team in life as well. So you need just as much a good personal trainer, mindset coach, financial advisor for property, wealth, and all that, because your team in business will rely on your team in the personal level, because both of those need to be humming. Get a relationship counselor if you're not going well in your marriage, right? All that also applies, because when those other things, get a good doctor or a health practitioner as well, because when those things don't go well, they affect the business, whether you like it or not, whether you like to admit it or not, they do. And so have that team for the business, have that team for the personal life as well.
That is great advice. And the other thing is, some of these people, they don't necessarily need to be people and particularly in the pandemic, I came up with this concept of virtual mentors. And, I have a series of virtual mentors, who I used to go once a year to America to go and meet and be in conferences with and listen to, etc. But now people like, you may know the name Peter Diamandis, very much abundance in all ways and health. People like Joe Polish from a marketing perspective. I've got my own coach, Dan Sullivan, from Strategic Coach in the US. I've got these virtual mentors who, they challenge me as well. And then down to the basic of this magic thing. How many hours am I sleeping? How many steps am I doing? It's amazing how even a phone can be a great coach for you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an enormous amount of technology innovation that we can leverage to input that advice. One of the things I do on my walks is, listening to the podcast from some of the best entrepreneurs, but also leaders in different areas, whether it's bodybuilding or acting or theater performance. But find what are the world's best minds in each industry. What are the behaviors? Because ultimately what you want to do is you want to have those thoughts and behaviors ringing through your subconscious mind as you're operating on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's one of the things.
In fact, and it just popped to mind, I'm going to throw a biography back at you. Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, it's a fabulous read. And the way he was building, and while he was doing the bodybuilding, the way he was building a real estate investment business at the same time, and how he used to psych people out. It's a fabulous read of someone you wouldn't think. You just think he's bodybuilder, but it's much deeper.
Yeah, we're all layers. We're all human beings, have so many layers underneath them, and that's
right.
part of the magic. I think is that sometimes we, particularly when in dealing with workforce issues and so on, we judge people too quickly. Whereas if we bother to take the time to explore the deeper layers and find solutions that appeal to those deeper layers, we can actually create, fulfill the potential of people in an amazing way.
Correct. Dr. Albies, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciate the time to speak to you, and thank you.
And I've really enjoyed the conversation. And like all of these, I learn something every time. I've learned a number of things, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. Great to connect with you.
Great, thank you.